When it comes to actually purchasing a property, put very simply, there are two things that you need to consider. One, buy what you can afford, and two, buy what feels right for you. Okay, I know there wasn't particularly earth-shattering stuff, but they're really the only two things that you need to know. The first point is self-explanatory, albeit that it's tempting to sign on for more than you can actually afford and say statements like, "Don't worry, honey, we'll make it work." It's understandable, but you're going to be faced with temptation, but circumstances change, interest rates will fluctuate, and life serves up lemons. It's disappointing, but bills are going to continue to come in during that time. So you have to think, what if you lost your job? Could you really afford to support yourself, for a few months if you were out of work? It's really important to be smart and stay within your means. Sometimes the juice just definitely isn't worth the squeeze. When you start discussing your motivations to actually buy a property, it's pretty interesting because you'll start running into an opinion. And when it comes to property, particularly in Australia, everyone has a goddamn opinion. And this is where, the second statement really comes into play because ultimately the property is going to be yours. It's the place that you're going to get horizontal at night time. It's going to be the place that you hide from when the world just seems a little bit too scary. So look, it's important that you actually buy what feels right for you at a variety of levels. That could be a one-bedroom apartment located really close to the city, or it could be a 2-acre block an hour away from work. Really, it doesn't matter as long as it feels right for you. So try not to be too influenced by individuals, perhaps that are close to you, and what their opinions are of what you should do. So to walk you through the process of purchasing, we need to look at the following few things. Firstly, we need to weigh up whether it's worth buying a house or apartment. We need to also look at private treaty sales. We're going to go into some detail regarding options. We'll go into some detail regarding how to negotiate properly, and also discuss some precautionary measures as well. So this is what it's all about. You've got to ask and you've got to attempt in order to seal the deal. So it's an age-old argument. What's the better option? A house or an apartment? And I guess I just have to revert back to the previous comment. It just really depends on what feels right for you. So in deciding that, you have to take into consideration factors like your lifestyle. Do a bit of forward planning. Think about the financial implications and the potential for growth. All of those factors will come into play. By taking these factors into account, either a house or an apartment could be the right option for you based on a number of different variables involved. It truly just depends. Now, after lifestyle and forward planning requirements, the real clincher is the potential for capital growth. Now, the age-old argument between the two is that apartments actually represent better value for money because they have a lower price entry point. Alternatively, the argument for freestanding houses is that they have land around them, which appreciates in value when the dwelling or the house or the unit block actually depreciates in value. Now, both of these are actually fair statements to a certain extent. I also think that demographics and society has changed a lot, and people will choose proximity to city centres as a more appealing aspect as well. They want to be close to their family. They want to be close to where they work. It's important for them. So, hypothetically speaking, say that we're pre-approved to buy a $500,000 house, or a $500,000 property, I should say. Think about what's more important when it comes to these factors. Let's look at the lifestyle factor. From an apartment, it could be quite realistic that for $500K you'll have better proximity and location to major city and urban areas. You'll have to abide by the bylaws of the apartment community. And, you may have to make additional repayments to cover for maintenance and expenses, but you'll also have probably additional facilities. They could have social areas or breakout areas, perhaps gyms, saunas, pools, all lovely things to have. When it comes to the lifestyle from a house perspective, you've got additional room to move. Potentially it's going to be away further from urban areas or urban city hubs, but you can renovate it to your wishes along with the appropriate council regulations. There's room to move. You can have a dog and let it run around in the backyard. You know, you've got land, you've got space to move and create as your own. Now, forward planning, whether you're looking at a house or a unit, you know, think about your current and future lifestyle needs, particularly if you wish to start a family. Ongoing costs can be higher in a house as everything is basically the owner's responsibility compared to, you know, the shared costs in a building. With an apartment, you'll also have the responsibility for upkeep and will be required for additional contributions for building maintenance, insurance and future work. Your forward planning may also take into consideration whether you intend to keep the property as an investment or to sell it. Again, different factors will need to be considered with each option. Financial implications, you'll also have to think of this, you know, what's the process of securing a loan in either arrangement? Is it going to be exactly the same? What are the additional implications that I guess will be on future ongoing costs, and should they be covered off as part of your forward planning? And finally, growth. Demand for inner city living increases, and the land for these properties that they sit on will become increasingly valuable. Apartment developments, I should say, are more likely to spring up in inner city areas, and owning one of these apartments is basically an ownership in shared raising land value. But not all things are created equal. So poorly located or poorly designed apartments may miss on any increases in value. So do complexes have hundreds of units on one block, or, you know, is there a smaller proposition of land holdings that you actually own? If you start to search and take both of these options into consideration, you know, do inspections across all property types, whether they be apartments, townhouses, duplexes or detached houses. The more you see, the more in tune you'll become to what you actually want. You may decide that after looking at apartments for several weeks that they're just too small for your liking. Also, after doing several trial runs in peak hour traffic, the commuting grind may be too stressful to handle on a daily basis. You know, a change in preferences may appear before you, but you won't come to realise this until after you start to really get out there and get in amongst it. So have an adventure. Find out what your home is really going to be like. Private treaty sales and auctions are by far the most common ways of property transactions actually taking place within Australia. So a private treaty sale is generally the most common way in which property will be purchased. Now, a private treaty is where you negotiate the price of the property, including the price, you know, directly with the vendor or the real estate agent. The benefit of a private treaty sale is that there's quite a bit of flexibility, you know, and they offer the vendor the opportunity to negotiate, and they will have subject to clauses which refer to finance approval and building and pest inspections. Also, there's going to be a cooling off period as well. We're going to cover the contractual elements of private treaty sale and ruling the roost, so be sure to pay attention and watch those presentations as well. Auctions. It goes once, going twice, going 3 times, no final offers, sold. We all know the words, but in actual fact, an auction is considerably different for one main factor, in that an auction is actually a cash purchase, and you're generally entering into an unconditional contract once the hammer falls. Now, a deposit of around about 10% of the agreed purchase price is generally going to be payable. So this is a great reason why real estate agents will go to auction, because it pushes people to actually commit on the day. Auctions are really coming into vogue within a seller's market. The auction will play on people's emotions, but in a really concentrated manner. I guess the vendor hopes that by playing on this emotion, it's going to push up the end result and also achieve an unconditional contract. So what's actually the auction process? Well, before the auction day, if you do have an interest in the property, you have to get a building and PEX inspection completed. And if required by your state, you also have to register as a bidder. Registering is required in some states basically to eliminate dummy bidding, I should say. Now, on the day of the auctioneer or the agent will basically agree on a reserve price with the vendor. Now, once this price is achieved, the property is technically on the market and will sell on the fall of the hammer. Now, before bidding commences, the auctioneer will generally announce and detail the information relating to the specific state laws and rules that apply. Now, these rules will vary from region to region, so make sure you discuss this with the agent beforehand. The auction will commence with an opening bid where the auctioneer will ask for someone to start off the proceedings. Now, sometimes the auctioneer may call it themselves and indicate that they're taking bids in $5,000, $10,000 or $20,000 increments, whatever it may be. Now, you can bid any amount outside of the specified range, but it's up to the auctioneer's discretion whether it is accepted, as you might try and put in a low bid when plenty of other bidders are wanting to keep the momentum going. So it's really a trial and see type of method. Now, this is where things actually get tricky with the auction process, because the dynamics of other people competing against each other all at once. So if the momentum completely stalls and bidding is below the reserve price, an auctioneer can pause the auction in order to speak to the vendor. Now, the auctioneer may ask the vendor to consider a lower price or to make a vendor's bid. Now, with a vendor's bid, the auctioneer can come back and indicate that the vendor has made a bid of X number of dollars and they're going to be taking increments of X number of dollars. Generally, this is an indication that the auction isn't going all that well, and for the vendor it'll either pass in, meaning that it hasn't achieved the desired price and the auction has completed. Alternatively, if the auctioneer announces that it's on the market, it will be closed on the fall of the hammer to the highest bidder. Now, if the property is passed in and doesn't sell, usually the vendor will try and negotiate with the highest bidder on the day in order to close out the deal. What you need to be aware of, though, when you're going to an auction is that an immediate deposit, usually 10% of the purchase price, is going to be required after the auction. The balance will then need to be paid at settlement. Also, with an auction, there's not a cooling off period. Building and pest inspections need to be completed prior to the auction, and the contract will be subject to these clauses. Your finances will also need to be approved prior to committing to the contract, as it is a cash sale. So one thing that a mortgage broker and myself in particular could help you out with is a deposit bond. So what a deposit bond is basically a cost-effective way to cover the deposit of your purchase when you cannot immediately access the cash. Whether you will have to wait for the finances actually approved. So I guess the bonds will be equal in value to the deposit. The bond will be viewed basically as an insurance policy in that money doesn't actually exchange hands, and the funds will be paid in full at settlement. Basically, the deposit bond is offered as a fallback measure in that if you forfeit the contract, the vendor can recoup the deposit through insurance. If using or thinking of using this method, seek professional legal advice, as there are some catches in the purchasing arrangements that may or may not be accepted. But here are a couple of tips to bid when you're going to an auction. You really got to bid with confidence. Perhaps consider bidding in unusual numbers. People may look at you a bit funny, but they're looking at you funny because it's off-putting. It's just another way to play the game. Don't get caught up in the hype. Don't let the agent pressure you or get in your face. There's a thing called personal space, and it has to be respected. Now, don't set your limit on a round figure because it may mean missing out on only a marginal amount. Say you set your price at $500K but it sells for $507,000. It's likely that you're going to be a little miffed if that happens. However, you have to stay within your budget. So get some practice too. Go to a few auctions to watch and observe. Give it a bit of a test run. Get to know the whole process, and on the day, stick to your budget. Have your administration sorted. Be registered to bid. Bring the deposit and bring a friend so you can squeeze their hand throughout the process. And they can help rein in your enthusiasm if you get too carried away and start wanting to bid beyond your limit as well. So good luck on auction day. Now, numerous books have actually been written in relation to the art of negotiation. So I'm going to try and give it, a little bit of justice with a few of my own tips in which you should consider. Now, in a private treaty arrangement, it'll be likely that you'll have had a fair amount of interaction with the agent. And being human, they'll probably have some preconceived ideas themselves. The vendor will have a price that they will need or want, and they're probably going to be adding some fat on top of that as well. And I always imagine that fat to be around about the 20% mark. And you're probably thinking if that's worth 20% less. So realistically, the true price of the property is what you think it's worth and what the vendor thinks it's worth. It's probably somewhere in between. Now, with the first offer, I strongly encourage everyone to put that offer in writing. Legally, agents are required to take written offers to the vendor. So check out the tools and templates section when you log in, and there's a couple of free templates on how that offer letter could look. Now, a low written offer may make the agent particularly nervous, particularly if they've overpromised the vendor. Even better, I would staple a check with your deposit to the letter offer as well. Now, there's no need to worry. It's only going to be cashed if the offer is actually accepted. With a written offer and a deposit in hand, firstly, it's going to show how serious you are. And second, it speaks volumes to the vendor subconsciously as they actually feel they're really close to securing the deal. It's a pretty powerful way of negotiating. Sure, there might be some back and forth and the agent may tweak and twirl and twerk in order to seal the deal, but it's a great way of getting them to come to the table if the offer is lower than their guidance price, within reason, obviously. Now, when you're going backwards and forwards on price, never reveal your walk-away price, as they're going to attempt to get you there as close as possible to that outcome. Now, negotiation may not always be about price. If you have an idea of your vendor's motivations, that's great. If not, maybe just ask the agent, as the highest price may not always be the real sweetener. Maybe you could do a quickie sale. If you're pre-approved and they want out, this could be the perfect sweetener for them, to have a short sale contract. Or perhaps you could be willing to have a clause or two to speed up the deal. Alternatively, the vendor may need more time to pack up and arrange things for their next move. In such case, maybe consider a longer settlement period, maybe 60 or 90 days or 120 days, for example. Do whatever you feel is required in order to get it over the line, and always seek professional advice prior to committing to it, or even omitting any contractual terms. Also, instead of negotiating on price, consider other factors. Maybe ask for some furniture or appliances to be included in the contract. If there's a nice lounge setting, a telly, or an outdoor setting perhaps, maybe these items are things that people could part with, and perhaps it could also sweeten the deal for yourself as well. So negotiation is really highly dependent on the state of the market. In a buyer's market, you could throw a low-ball offer and get it over the line. In a seller's market, you may have to pay above the asking price. However, if the house or the flat really ticks all the boxes, you've got to give it a red-hot go. But if not, there's a lot of other perfect places out there, sometimes even more perfect than the place that you're negotiating on. So Stick with it and achieve the best outcome for you. Given that you're making one of the biggest investments in your life, it's a really good idea to actually play it safe in order to achieve the best outcome for you. Now, price will generally always be the biggest factor, and you don't want to be overpaying, that's for certain. So to ensure this won't happen, perhaps seek out an independent valuation beforehand. It's a good precautionary measure. Another good precautionary measure is to use a conveyancer. You want to ensure that the property is unencumbered and that you're purchasing a property with a clean title. This prevents hidden surprises popping up down the track. Also, conveyancing will also uncover easements and boundary lines. So it's important to ensure that what you perceive to be buying is in actual fact what you are buying. I believe there's 3 simple factors that can get you unstuck in a property purchase. Firstly is being too emotional. Agents and investors and vendors, I should say, can actually smell desperation. If you fall in love and you want to shout it from the rooftops, that's great. But look, in doing so, you're only going to see the dollar signs rolling in the back of an agent's head. The second thing is not knowing the market. So it's imperative that you do your research, have knowledge of previous comparable prices, and do this prior to actually making an offer. And thirdly, it's not being ready and able. Don't be a false starter. It's never good. Time and money can be lost into the abyss if this is the case. Be approved with your finance. Complete the necessary inspections. Use a conveyancer and be prepared to go through the slog of negotiation, through the stress and worry that can be generated from the process until it is actually finalised. The housing dream is out there for everyone. Disappointingly, the potential to buy and the dream requires having the right brief, having your finances together and knowing what you can truly afford. So just be patient and you will find the right home for you. Patience through this phase will definitely pay big dividends, particularly to your stress levels. So do your due diligence, and when it feels right, go for it. If it doesn't, for whatever reason, just keep walking. And most importantly, do something. Act. Give it a go. You never know what might eventuate when you say the words, "We'd like to make an offer." Or even better still, "I'm going to give you an offer in writing and my deposit's going to be stapled to it as well. We really want to buy this property." Good luck. Get out there and give it a go. Now, evolutionary theory suggests that many animals, and that's including humans, have a genetic predisposition to acquire and retain property. It's instinct. Now, this is hardly surprising because survival is closely bound up with the acquisition of things like food and shelter and tools and territory. So, do you follow your gut? Listen to what it has to say. Instinctively, you'll know it's right when it's right. If you've done your research, attended numerous open homes, and you've gained mastery of the market. When the right place presents itself and meets the criteria you established, 2 weeks ago or several weeks ago or months ago, it'll be the one that you've imagined. That is, that it's the right place with the right conditions at the right price. All means that it's time to act, which will bring us to next week's webinar on, how to actually rubber stamp the deal and how to rule the roost in that process. So thanks everybody. We look forward to chatting again through the next presentations. And the buyer's guide, I would just like to say, is a referrals-based business. We know that there's lots of home buyers out there that could really benefit from the expertise that we offer. And, referrals would absolutely be welcomed. We would love to get as many Australians as possible to help realise their home ownership dreams and secure their financial future. So until next time, thanks again. Bye-bye.